So next up, podcast listeners, we have the dumbest bill in America. And do we have a lead up, Mr. Producer? Here it is.
Dum 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 dum.
And it's the dumbest bill in America, and it is illegals can drive without a license. In Massachusetts, illegals can drive without a license. In Massachusetts, Representative Tricia Farley-Bouvier, I love it, Tricia Farley-Bouvier, because I think Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, wasn't her maiden name Bouvier? Wasn't it Bouvier Kennedy? So maybe Tricia Farley-Bouvier is related. Maybe. Wouldn't be surprised. She's a Democrat from Pittsfield, Massachusetts. She's the lead sponsor of a bill, number 448, which says, among other things, that illegals can not only get a license, but if they're stopped, they can't be arrested for driving without a license, because if they're arrested, then, ICE might pick them up and deport them. So we can't do that. We just can't do that at all. So she actually has a bill that says that they can get a license. So she held a rally. By the way, she's had this bill in for a couple of years, but now it's becoming law, I believe. Or it's very close to becoming law. And she puts the bill in every year. And now, of course, she's going to get her way. And she's had rallies over the years of this bill, number 448, which looks like it's advancing. And the rallies include, of course, the Hispanic community, because in Massachusetts, particularly in Cambridge, but the greater Massachusetts area, there are over 200,000 that we know of, illegal immigrants. And she thinks it's better to give them a license because that's what's fair. So she held a rally, and we have a short clip on that, and here it is.
And so we need our kids to go to school. We need to take our kids to the doctor's appointments. We just need to live our lives and live it without fear. And it's not okay that people are afraid to do such a simple thing as drive.
So this is the typical left, right? It's not so awful that people should be able to do something as simple as drive. Yeah, driving in America, if you're here legally, is still a privilege. And that's what I was always taught when I took my driving course. By the way, driving is not a right, driving is a privilege. And what she's saying is, oh no, driving is a right, especially if you're illegally present. And moreover, when you're stopped and you're an illegal here in the United States and you don't have a driver's license, well, you can't be arrested because it's a right to be here illegally. Here's the emergency preamble of her bill. Whereas the deferred operation of this act would tend to defeat its purpose, which is to assure that Massachusetts residents be able to travel safely during the declaration of emergency-related COVID-19 and thereafter. Therefore, it is hereby declared to be an emergency law. It's an emergency to pass this law because it's necessary for the immediate preservation of the public convenience. So if you ever thought, podcast listeners, or suspected that Democrats use emergencies or used and have continued to use COVID-19 as an emergency excuse to pass absurd laws, when here's more proof of it, right? It's an emergency, so therefore we're going to do things. We're going to issue edicts and pass these laws because these individuals have every right to do all of the same things that you do because your American citizenship isn't special. It doesn't matter anymore. And so here it is in Mass Live magazine. Lawmakers renew push to expand driver's licenses to undocumented immigrants. I love it. Undocumented immigrants in Massachusetts. State legislators renewed their push to expand driver's licenses to immigrants without status, refiling a bill last week. The bill, HD 448 SD 273, would allow residents, regardless of immigration status, to apply for a state driver's license and stipulate what documents someone would need to provide while applying for a license. Yeah, In other words, they don't have any documents, but they can show up and apply for a license. 16 states currently have similar laws on the books. Oh, and that makes it all the better, right? Well, 16 states are doing it, so we got to do it too. Representative Christine Barber, a Somerville Democrat who refiled the bill, said people need access to driver's licenses more during the pandemic, as they work essential jobs that cannot be done remotely, particularly immigrants in Massachusetts cities that have seen higher COVID-19 rates. Well, maybe that's because they're crossing the border and we're not testing them when they're crossing the border. I mean, and we're not even stopping them, let alone testing them. Quote, we know right now, without the ability to drive safely, people are limited to public transportation, Barber said. Having a car is not a right in the United States. That's why we have public transportation. Because driving a car isn't a right, it's a privilege. And owning a car isn't a right, it's a privilege. You get to actually pay for it. But not with her. She's like, it's terrible. You have to use public transportation. Barbara said, we've seen some video and some pictures of some really crowded buses because they're running at reduced schedules because of the pandemic. And they could not put workers, and they are actually putting workers at greater risk of the virus, she said. But the workers she's talking about aren't you and I. It's not your grandparents who are on a fixed income. Oh no, it's the illegals who are present that she's really worried about. Quote, since COVID, it really has increased the urgency of this bill. It's an emergency where there is really about keeping workers and our neighbors safe, she added. I'm hopeful that we can pass this soon. Barber filed the bill last week with Representative Tricia Farley Bouvier of Pittsfield, Senator Brendan Creighton of Lynn, and Senator Adam Gomez of Springfield, all Democrats. They plan to announce the bill's filing at a news conference. And this was, of course, months ago. And I think now the bill is finally coming into law. It's taken all this time. And of course, this is all coordinated because President Biden is pushing for a path to citizenship, which is the reason why we have an open border. And it's the reason why cities like New York, as we've said before, have legalized illegals to vote in New York City. That's what it's all about, podcast listeners. It's not about keeping illegal immigrants safe. If it were, they would be tested and treated at the border and returned home. But they're not. It's about letting as many in as possible and changing America forever. By the way, changing America's politics forever. Nice try out there, because I'm sure the left is going to go, oh my gosh, it's because you don't want those people who are Hispanic. Nope, that's not what I'm talking about. Because the reason you want all of these illegals here is because you are trying to change America's politics. And you are trying to undermine the individuals who have built this country and the individuals who've gotten here legally and who respect our laws. And you keep changing the goalposts. And when you keep changing the goalposts about laws and about what does matter to the people here in this country, at some point, you know what you're going to do? You're going to foster unrest. You're going to foster unrest because people are going to be like, well, wait a minute. The laws apparently don't matter because you keep changing them like every single year that you go in there. And this is why we do, podcast listeners, the dumbest bill in America, because it demonstrates to you that we have too many laws. We're not even enforcing the laws that we have. And then you have Democrats who don't believe that laws should really matter, that laws should be principled, that American citizenship doesn't matter, that we are a sovereign nation. They don't care about that. This is all about political power. You know it and I know it. And that is the dumbest bill in America. Illegals can drive without a license in Massachusetts. And that's it for Mark and the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our producer, Christopher Hopkins. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Parler, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.